What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today I have decided to throw a little bit of a curveball and give you guys a 2-round 2025 NFL mock draft post-combine. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Below my face, my board, it is not predictive. These are the players that I love the most. So I do back it up with all 22 clips over on my X page. Feel free to follow me over there. But I'm going to be doing this little curveball because I love you guys so much. There's something that's gone over on Twitter. You guys feel free to check it out yourselves. And the fact that you guys have just been so supportive over there in the midst of, in my opinion, a psychotic breakdown is incredible. So thank you guys for that. Again, I'm not making any claims in case some crazy party wants to do something, but I will just say I really do appreciate y'all. Certain people, you just can't handle certain little pokes. Like for me, I get a little bit feisty sometimes. I get it. Sometimes people say that, the way I stand looks a little zesty. I get it. I suck at taking photos. I do. But that's all right. I love you guys anyways, but thank you guys again. That's why I'm doing this. So let's start this out. There's going to be no trades. As much as I love y'all, this is going to be a 3-hour video if it's with trades. If you do want to support the show, feel free to go over and use code HAILMARY when you sign up for UnderDog Fantasy. You get up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you sign up, and I get $60. So I do appreciate that nonetheless, but it's an app that I use as it is. Let's get into this with the number 1 overall pick. Again, we're not really going to be doing any trades here. We could talk about a Myles Garrett trade just because, again, pick trades is just, it's a little bit much. But there is the idea hey, what if Myles Garrett does get moved post June 1st? If that's going to be the case, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not 100% sure. You guys can feel free to correct me on this. I don't really think they're going to be able to move draft capital for this year if they're going to trade him post. Does that make sense? It'd be interesting to see how that works out, but please feel free to let me know in that regard. But we'll talk about it when we get to pick number 2. But if the Tennessee Titans are staying at number 1, which I think they should, because theoretically, if you do trade with the New York Giants, I don't trust Shedeur Sanders going at 2. I really do think it would be Abdul Carter in that case, especially because the Myles Garrett trade is looming. And for the Titans, I think the drop-off from Abdul Carter to Travis Hunter in this system would be too much. And again, that has nothing to do with my opinion of Travis Hunter. I love him to death. He's a blue chip player for me. I think he's a super weapon who can play any position that you really want him to in terms of receiver, corner, or even free safety as well. I really do like Travis Hunter, but for the Titans, I think the secondary, especially at the corner spot, is one of the few areas where I would not spend a top pick, right? So I would say that would be a little bit of a waste and a potential risk that I personally would not take. So I'm going to be going after Abdul Carter at number 1 overall and getting the deal done. But again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Cleveland Browns, they could end up trading post June 1st. Because I don't really know the technicalities about that, and again, I am still a student of the game. I'm still relatively new to this. I've been watching the game my entire life, but there are so many complexities, and you guys have been watching it, some of you, much longer than I've been alive. So feel free to, of course, give insight on that. I do appreciate you guys, and honestly, responding to y'all is the best part about doing this. It's fun to talk about players, but the fun part is the fact that I get to talk to it with you guys. And so I really do appreciate the fact that, I get to do a passion and you get to support me at the same time. I love you guys for that. But at number 2 overall, we'll have a Myles Garrett trade. Why the hell not? I think it's such a dick move for me not to do that. And so when we do see a team if we're going to throw out the most probable team in terms of the betting odds, a couple of weeks ago, it was, how can I not see the letter W? Oh, I'm tripping. It just didn't have them in the recommended teams. Washington Commanders, trading away that 5th round pick for Debo. Gonna be honest, you're continuing to reduce the quantity of picks, right? And so I would be looking, if I'm the Browns, I want to go NFC first off, and then I also want to go to a team that potentially could give me a higher 1st round pick next year than maybe what they would end up giving me this year. In other words, is there a team with a little bit of turmoil going on, or maybe some organizational shifting that could yield a higher pick than the high pick here? Now, you could say, hey, the Bears could still be calling. They're trying to build up a roster. That would be insane. But I do think that the Detroit Lions, especially with the moves that the Bears have been making, are going to be getting a little bit anxious. And For this deal, I think it'll be a 1, a 3, a 1, and then maybe a 2 or a 3 in the future. I really do see a little bit of a lack of value here outside of pick number 60 that I don't see the Detroit Lions trying to give up necessarily. And of course, for Cleveland, you could try to be able to flip this one. You get 28 and 60. Maybe you can toss in pick 94 in the equation. I'm going to leave that up to y'all. Maybe this could be the equation. You do you. It's not going to affect the mock draft after pick 64. So I'll just leave it there. We'll have Myles Garrett sent, and just so you guys see, there we go. We'll toss him into the equation. There you go, Myles Garrett. And so that's a trade I've seen proposed before. I think it'll be good for Detroit because you do need to have some extra momentum going forward. You guys are a championship level team, but there is a chance for you guys to have a little bit of a lag year next year because you do lose your offensive mind in Ben Johnson. You lose your defensive mind in Aaron Glenn. But at the same time, when you have Myles Garrett, he can end up kind of turning the tides on defense. Do you have the system in place on offense? That's going to be the biggest question. So I did want to be able to get us at least another pick in here for the Browns. But if you are sitting here at number 2, I do think Cam Ward's the selection, the quarterback spot. I mean, Adam Schefter, I know he's just yapping on a live stream, essentially, when he was saying, the most confident thing I am is that the Browns are going QB at 2. I get it. Maybe it's some smokescreen from the Browns to have the Giants move up and select Cam Ward so they can get Abdul Carter. That would be some 4D chess right there. But I do think there's a good chance that they are still going to be going after a quarterback, and Cam Ward would be the choice. At number 3 for the Giants, I've been hearing, again, I am no insider. I just want to make that very clear. What I do is I end up spending a lot of time on Twitter, and I end up following people who I respect a lot who are very connected. But on top of that, I have some really good friends who I honestly do trust their connections. I'm not going to say that I'm the person who's connected at all. All I'll do is repeat what I've heard from people that I respect. And so when I end up hearing guys like Trevor Sikkema talk about in their 2-round mock draft that there's almost this opinion that it appears in the NFL draft that Shedeur Sanders is closer to QB3 than QB1. I do get worried for the Giants, and the Giants are probably going to make a strong push for Aaron Rodgers, just like they made a very strong push for Matt Stafford. And I think they're in a race right now with the Raiders, who just ended up paying an inordinate amount of money to Max Crosby, which I am in favor of because that is the lifeblood of your team. I love him. So I do worry that we need to test out the situation, and let's test out the theory that Shedeur Sanders will fall. And I think that's a smart thing to do. And it's very easy. You guys will see if Shedeur Sanders falls out of the top 10, you will see very quickly how fast he falls. And there's a good chance. I mean, we're hearing from guys even like Brett Coleman saying like, hey, the guys who I talk to, not a single one has a first round grade on the guy. And yes, you don't need to. And yes, there's always going to be those individuals. There's somebody who probably had like a 3rd round grade on Caleb somewhere in the ether. But I think that when I haven't really heard very many minds saying, hey, this guy's worth a top 5, top 10 selection, I do think that when you hear that phrase, the quarterback is not a 1st round grade, you'll see them in the late 1st, right? If it's like, hey, I have a 2nd round grade on him, the range is going to be towards the latter half of the 1st, which is great for a trade up if you are the Giants, for example, or if you are the Browns and you miss out on your quarterback at 1. Like, that is an opportunity to where if the Browns really were just like, we love Travis Hunter, and then that'd be best case scenario for the Titans there, but they can go Travis Hunter and then Shedeur Sanders as well. Again, I'm going to try to play some 4D chess in terms of like the mental game there, but regardless, I'm going to go after Travis Hunter here because I do think that after everything I've heard from people that I respect, again, I am no insider. I'm not. I mean, I'm not going to pose as an insider. I'm going to pose as somebody who genuinely wants to logically think opinions out. And sometimes that might lead to overanalysis, but as long as I end up trying my best, we can end up finding holes in the analysis, or maybe teams just don't always follow logic. And that's okay. That's okay. It happens to the best of us. But regardless, it puts the Tennessee Titans, my God, the New England Patriots, we have them at number 4. And this is the toughest pick. This is the toughest pick, in my opinion, in the entire draft, if Travis Hunter goes at 3. And I know for a fact that, okay, I'm saying that with obvious being overly explicit, being a little bit over the top, but in all seriousness, I feel very confidently that individuals in the media do not take quarterback 2 times in the top 3 every single time, because it is nearly impossible to decide what they do at 4 and 5. As soon as you do that, it is nearly impossible. So let's evaluate what's happening right now. So for the Patriots, Mason Graham, 24 pounds under what was expected. 24 reps on the bench press as well. So the same amount of pounds under as he did on the bench. And then on top of that, he didn't have great arm length at 32. Not bad. Not bad. I mean, like, again, you might be hoping for the 35-inch arm guys. I mean, yeah, everyone wants a Josh Farmer. But you don't always get that. The problem is, when you're sitting at number 4, like, that is going to be a little more limited. The power's not there. The size is not there. And all of a sudden, there's this like narrative going around that I don't think is true, that Kenneth Grant basically made Mason Graham look better than he was. I'm not going to go there. I think Mason Graham is the defensive interior one in this class. I think he's very good. But I do think some other players really have made a strong push for number 4. And his lack of impressiveness because of the physical attributes could legitimately keep him out of this number 4 overall pick. And I think this is the perfect time to get ballsy. Like, I know you guys hate when I say that. Some of you love it, and that's why you guys are absolute addicts. And those of you who are, I am extreme addicts of you as well. But I do think that if we are not allowing trades, nor do I think a team would trade into this spot, I think we need to understand and like theorize and kind of label what we think are the draft values of particular players. With Tetairoa McMillan, he's not running. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I heard he's not running the entire draft cycle, which is worrisome. And I've heard a lot of people are saying he's going to be a latter half of the draft kind of receiver, maybe somewhere in that 18 range, right? So I don't think that is going to be a number 4 overall pick. You look at Josh McDaniels as well. I think that when you look at what Mike Vrabel's had success with, it's kind of like Derrick Henry's the guy who comes to mind, right? That is a focal point of the offense. Of course, you have Drake May, but we also saw Will Campbell. Armand Membu absolutely should be starting to be thought of here at number 4 because he's a crazy athlete, but I do think we're having a little bit of combine, how do I put it? Like combine preference, right? And Armand, he's red hot from the combine. By the time of the draft, the red hotness will disappear, but he's a great athlete, and he will go in the top 11 picks. I am pretty much certain of that. So don't get me wrong there. But Will Campbell dropped his stock. He did not necessarily perform, and nor did he measure out the way that you would want for a number 4 overall pick. Josh Simmons didn't even measure out as well as I was hoping for. He had 33-inch arms, not necessarily great. So I do worry about this team, and I think tackle needs to be a second-round issue. And Tetairoa McMillan, already talked about it, looks like he's going to be falling, but the draft bamboozles us all the time. I'm going to go crazy, and we're going to go after Ashton Genty. Again, when you look at the success Vrabel has had, in my opinion, it is because of a very strong run game. And I don't think Drake May is going to complain, especially if you continue investing in the offensive line, which we will. We will. Trust me, there's going to be some offensive linemen there. As much as I love to take them, there's going to be some in round 2. But I think that the focal point of the offense being the running game, especially when you can invest at round 2, maybe some free agency capital as well into the offensive line, you could end up having a much more successful season overall than what anybody would probably project for the Patriots. I do think they're a couple pieces away, and not away from a Super Bowl, but away from competing for the playoffs. And that's a good spot to be in. And I know, so this is actually like a great counterpoint. You don't take running backs before you're ready because by the time you've already used up 2 out of the 5 or 6 years of their useful lifespan, right? That's a good counter argument. But at the same time, if this is clearly the best player in terms of what would fit your system and what would improve your team the most, it gets you closer than anybody else. And I do have faith, especially with the amount of money that you guys can spend and honestly, the trust that I have in your coaching staff. I think this can end up working as a net positive. So at number 5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, we're gonna go crazy. We ended up doing this during the draft as well. We did live streams during the draft. I hope you guys really did enjoy that. But looking at the players who are gaining the most amount of hype and looking at what would best fit the Jaguars, Christian Kirk just ended up being released today. Wide receiver is a very legitimate need, and you have a coach now that is coming from a team that had someone in the name Mike Evans, but also in the name of Chris Godwin. But also, we're talking about the best player available is potentially Matt Golden, who ran in the sub 4.3 range, who came out as the #1 wide receiver on one of the most studded rosters in terms of 5 stars. Never was supposed to be. He ended up coming out, and he's testing unbelievably well. Now, I don't think I have the balls to go Matt Golden just yet, but I did in my crazy mock draft, and I'm not willing to go crazy. I'm not there just yet, but I do think that he's picking up enough steam to where this is a semi-legitimate range for him. But I do think that Mason Graham at this point has still enough to be able to justify it. Like, again, Genty is such an addition that I feel comfortable. With the Jaguars here at 5, I don't think there's a corner available that has that hype. I don't think people have confidence in Will Johnson just yet. So I do think they're stuck. And without a trade, and again, with Tetaroa, we're assuming he's going to be pushed down just a bit. I'm not going to put him all the way. I'm not going to force him to the 20s like we did in a fun mock draft. But I will be going Mason Graham because I do think that the athleticism is going to be very coveted. You look at Kalijah Cansey with where Liam Cohen just came from, and Mason Graham has that gap penetration ability. Not going to make a comp there at all. But I'm saying athleticism and not necessarily size is something that has worked before. But let's speed this up. Let's still have a good time here. At number 6, again, something I did want to emphasize for you guys who are going to say, "Oh, why aren't you going Shedeur Sanders here?" Because I do believe that, well, first off, we're doing this under the assumption. I'm not predicting it. It's part of the mock draft. I want to be able to have a parameter that Shedeur Sanders slips. I think it's fair. Yes, Tom Brady has thrown the ball with Shedeur Sanders, trained with him a bit. I think that's really awesome. But you also see Max Crosby trying to recruit Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there's also Sam Darnold out there. And the Raiders and Giants both ended up putting pretty heavy bids out there, from what is said, for Matt Stafford, which means they are not confident in this quarterback class yielding a true quarterback 1. And when I see rank 47 on Shedeur Sanders, I'm not a PFF rank watcher, but I do respect Trevor Sikkema to the point where I know he's not making it super public about what he thinks, but he's also making it super public without saying it. And I respect that because no one likes to talk crap about players. I get it. And Shedeur is a good player. Top 50 players in the whole entire country that are draft eligible is awesome. So I do want to say that. But looking at the other options for pick number 6, I do think you guys should try to trade for Zach Charbonnet. Running back would have been easy if Genty were here, but he is not. Now, this is actually, I ended up screwing myself by taking Genty early. This is like the easy cop-out pick right here. But the question is, who else, again, we're assuming Shedeur falls. Who else would be the selection? And we assume Tet falls a little bit. Could be the DK Metcalf for Pete Carroll, but DK was very fast, right? Like, let's just be honest. This is not apples to apples comparison. Will Johnson would be great, kind of like very Richard Sherman-y, which I do see that as a potential choice for y'all. It's a tough spot. It is a tough spot if we're being real. And I do think you guys could bring on, well, I think Lockett retired, or no, he got released. You guys can end up doing that. You guys can end up trading for DK if you want. But this is not an easy spot to be in, and we will speed this up, absolutely. But this is just some of the tougher parts of the draft that I personally do not like very much. Johnny Barron was a pick I thought I could go with because, you think of Devin Witherspoon, right? But Devin Witherspoon was a press man, absolute heat-seeking missile. And Johnny Barron is almost the antithesis of that. He is IQ, he is ball skills, and he is just like locking down portions of the field. Malachi Starks is a crazy one. Like, that's the potential option because Spytech definitely likes that idea. But I also could end up seeing them looking at Armand Membu, seeing some good value, but I like DJ Glaze. It's a tough spot to be in. Bottom line, guys, very tough spot to be in. Wish I could trade out, but I do think that ultimately they look at the options that are available, and I mean, Matt Golden as a burner, you guys already have that on your roster. I will throw I'll end up saying that by, no, I can't do that because I would have ended up going at that number 5 for the Jaguars. God, this is a tough ass pick. Holy crap. You know what? I think with Will Johnson falling so much, I'm going to think that's a smokescreen. Richard Sherman, wasn't the most athletic guy. He also was a 5th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been a little bit earlier than that. Feel free to correct me on that. But Will Johnson might not have the athleticism. He has the tape. I'm going to throw the curveball and say Will Johnson is getting artificially smoked down to the board, and he's the one who ends up being the Pete Carroll selection. Which, to be fair, we always bitched at Pete for going after the non-traditional picks of the guys who are slipping or the guys who didn't belong there. So I think that's fair. I mean, that's perfectly fair. At number 7 for the Jets, again, we are under the assumption that Shedeur Sanders doesn't go in the top 10. I'm not reporting news, but I think it makes it fun because this puts us in very awkward situations. Jahdae Barron could end up being a very similar role to Brian Branch. I do have some issues, though, with the idea of, Michael Carter being there. MC2 just got a contract extension, right? You guys called that out perfectly. But I do think this is where we can see Armand Membou. I'm going to give a shout out to Connor Rogers right here. Armand Membou is stock sky high, but that right tackle spot is vacant. Armand Membou is a pure right tackle. You have Fashanu, you have Membou. That can end up working out really damn well. Both of them very athletic tackles with actually a lot of potential, both of them. So I really do like the idea of what Membou and Fashanu could be in a year or two, potentially even year 1. At number 8 for the Carolina Panthers, again, we're going to try to push Tet down a little bit. Otherwise, I would have taken him at 5. You guys know that I love sending Tet to Liam Cohn. But at number 8 overall, there's some good players. I've been seeing James Pierce falling because of those personality concerns. People are really, really concerned. And something that I saw Brett Coleman, I believe, say, feel free to call me out if I ended up misquoting it. But he was saying, hey, I hear these rumors about James Pierce's mental concerns, right? And sending him to where he once was, sending him home, might not be a good idea because it puts him around the same area that he had some mental concerns before. On top of that, at Tennessee. So I'll just say I do have my worries there. But I'll say the players who I'm thinking about is Jahad Campbell here, as well as the other player that he gets talked about all the time with Jalen Walker. Because a linebacker is being potentially wide open with Shaq Thompson leaving. Jalen Walker would be a perfect fit for that. But if you want to go for the super high ceiling and someone who can end up pass rushing a lot, Jahad Campbell might be the more sexy selection. And you know what? I'm here to test it out. Let's have fun. Jahad Campbell goes in the top 10. I mean, you guys know how much I love Jahad Campbell and how much I believe in him as an edge rusher as well. Former number 1 edge in his high school class. I think that's going to be an excellent selection. And again, we are assuming Tetaroa and Shedeur fall out of the top 10. I do want to put that out there because, again, I know not everybody watches every second of the video. So, at number 9 for the Saints, I've been locked in on this. I'm continuing to lock in on this. Kellen Moore loves his tight ends. Tyler Warren is just a dream reliability option for any quarterback that is there. You can barely ever, and I mean ever, get a top 5 to 10 tight end in free agency. You have to buy it in the draft. And it might not be the best cost savings, but it does give you access to something that most teams will never let you get the chance to get. At number 10 for the Chicago Bears, we ended up taking Genty really high. Now, I might get crucified for doing this, but I do think that there is a chance the Bears still go running back with Amari and Hampton here at number 10. I know you guys are going to execute me, but I do think that Drew Dahlman has a strong chance of being brought onto this team. It looks like you guys are being very aggressive in free agency for offensive line. Will Campbell's off the books at the moment because Joe Thuney, he's 32, but he's going to probably get a small extension. But on top of that, he's a veteran presence, and he even played some left tackle. So that's actually pretty damn solid. You also have Jackson on the team. Jackson was, not too long ago, a legitimate Pro Bowler, but I do see some issues, absolutely, when it comes to, the health and the recent play. You don't need to discount guard, but in the first round, I think you do. Now, would you believe that maybe Dennis Allen might see Michael Williams and be like, that is my guy right there? I think that is incredible. Same thing with Shamar Stewart. These players that are awe-inspiring could absolutely be intriguing to Dennis Allen. The biggest question is Could Ben Johnson say, I'm going to give my first pick as a head coach? And yeah, he's not the only one making decisions. I know Poles is as well. But does Ben Johnson allow Dennis Allen to have the ability to draft his edge rusher, his guy? I'm not going to say no. And I think the reason why that I would say no is because of that reason right there. Like, it is very tough to say, hey, when you have the ability to get your star running back on the table, it's hard to say no to that. But at 39, you could go Quinshon Judkins. You could go Travion Henderson. Like, you could go Byshul Tootin potentially in round 3, right? Like, you do have these options if you are going to go that route. But we also have to look at how the Lions drafted running back, and it was higher than anybody thought Jahmyr Gibbs should go. Nobody on planet Earth thought Jahmyr Gibbs should go at number 6, and he almost did. Then they traded back and celebrated as if it were the second coming when he ended up landing at 12. So I am going to go a little bit crazy here. And to be fair, I have Amari Hampton as RB1. And it is not because Amari Hampton is objectively way better than Genty. To be fair, they're separated by 1 point. And you know what that point is? Fumbling. Genty has 8 or 9 fumbles in the past 2 years. That could be an issue for some teams. But I have seen guys like Todd McShay and a couple other individuals as well bring up the fact that Amari Hampton is RB1 on certain teams' boards, or at least in the contention for it. And if they're in the contention for it, we've seen backs like Amari Hampton, Jahmyr Gibbs, they go in the top 12. And I think that the Cowboys would be willing to take it, so I don't think it's going to be out of the realm of possibility. I know it's going to be a reach to a lot of you, and it's going to be crazy. And I know that I'm going to get a lot of shit for this. But trust the process. I do think, again, teams like this that are going to be investing heavily in free agency are willing to take luxury picks on players that they think are going to be massive immediate impacts. And Amari Hampton is ridiculous. Like, again, feel free to go watch the end of my running back video where I have the conversation between Amari and Hampton as well as Ashton Genty. And it'll explain exactly why I love Amari and Hampton so much. At number 11 for the San Francisco 49ers, a lot of really, really good options here. And to be fair, Jahad Campbell would have been great. But if you guys are going to be letting Dre Greenlaw test free agency, which right now it looks like it's a feeling from, I believe I saw a tweet about Schefter saying it, Jalen Walker could be a really, really good pick. Like, I think that's going to be great. But you look at Kelvin Banks, and Kelvin Banks came in at 6'5" and with 33 and I believe 3/8 inch arms. So that's really good. I mean, that solved a lot of issues for Kelvin, and he looked more athletic than he was in game, which means to me, and again, I got fooled by Jordan Davis doing this, but Jordan Davis was an extreme example. Most of the guys who I see look really healthy over the offseason tend to have really good habits at home, which make them pretty good professionals. Like, to me, it's not very easy to ignore the food and, have a strict regimen and work your ass off and become athletic. I want to give guys credit for that. And I do think Kelvin Banks has worked his way a bit more up the board, but not all the way to number 11. I do think, though, when you look at the history of, you guys just brought in Robert Saleh. Saleh could go after, if you do have Jahad Campbell here, his guy. You can end up getting your version of Will McDonald. You can also get your Will linebacker while you're talking about it. But I also think Michael Williams could be essentially your Jermaine Johnson here. And Michael is a freak. People still see unbelievable potential. And same thing with Shamar Stewart. But Michael Williams has a clear vision in my mind for what you are going to run here. So I'm actually going to go after Michael Williams. At number 12 for the Dallas Cowboys, this is where I can see them starting to go after Tetero and McMillan, right? It feels a little bit more comfortable. This is the range where I'm starting to open up the opportunity. Now, you could look at someone potentially even like Shamar Stewart. We're talking about some trade rumors right now about Micah Parsons. I don't fully buy into it. Now, see Max Crosby get that much money? That's going to shift some things. It's going to shift some things for sure. But I do think this is the point where Jerry's going to be like, well, we need wide receiver, and this guy is going to be a big, heavy receiver. Yes, Jerry's not the sole decision maker by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think this is where the Cowboys are going to go after Tetero and McMillan. They like big physical dudes who maybe aren't perfectly smooth around the edges, but have a ton of potential. They got Tyler Guyton last year. I trust them to go with Tetairoa McMillan. They like guys who are physical. You look at Tyler Smith. I mean, hell, even Mozzie Smith was both big and physical. Like, I know that didn't work out, but I still give them credit where credit is due. They end up going after players that they see the potential in. I could see them looking at Tetairoa and seeing him as somebody that they truly see the potential in. I don't fully buy the big slip for Tetairoa McMillan as much as I would maybe want to say that it would be interesting to see. I also think that, speed is not part of his game that you need to really witness. I don't think it's the athleticism that really makes him pop. It's the smoothness, it's the trustworthiness that he brings to the table that I think would end up getting him drafted higher. But at number 13 for the Miami Dolphins, I might even go Jahdae Barron here, but I'm actually going to go and get a Weaver special. Going after Nick Emmanwori. Defensive interior is very intriguing, but Nick Emmanwori tested out better than any other safety in history. Ended up getting he's like one position he didn't do like a full 10, like best of all time. RAS score wise was linebacker, it was like a 9.87. He's 6'3", 220 pounds, but he ran, I think it was a 4.39. I think officially it was a 4.39 and might even be a 4.38, but also over a 40-inch vertical. And yeah, cool. He's a combine monster. How did he do on the field? Dude ended up getting 4 interceptions this year and ended up taking 2 of them to the house, one of which was called the back, which, it was because of a block in the back, it wasn't even a block in the back. It was Kyle Kennard just like laying the wood on Garrett Nussmeier. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Nick Emmanwori is an absolute beast and robs number 14 Indianapolis Colts of their guy. But for the Colts, I'm looking at Jahdae Barron here, and the flexibility of him as a safety option on this team while also being able to flex into the boundary, it does get me a little bit excited. And the zone coverage instincts, I've been saying Jahdae doesn't necessarily fit the profile that what the Colts run, but now you got Lou in there, and I think Jahdae Barron could be used as a Swiss Army knife. Lou ended up bringing on DJ Turner as well as, why the hell did I forget Dax Hill's name? And those guys didn't have great measurables at all in terms of like the actual size and weight. And so I think Jahdae Barron could be extremely intriguing here. Now, you could go after some offensive line route because the right guard spot's going to be open. You could go after Colston Loveland here that a lot of people really, really like. But I do think that the zone instincts, the ball skills, and the development that Jahdae Barron had on the boundary is very, very commendable. And it's something that I want to give credit for because he's able to play in the slot. He's able to play on the boundary. But the best thing is I don't want him as a pure slot. I don't. Unless you're in like a Fangio system, I don't want you as a pure slot. So, I mean, I just think Lou's going to use him right. That's the thing. I'm going to put my trust in Lou. And so Jahdae Barron going to be the selection at 14. At 15 for the Falcons, again, we could trade back, but we're not doing trades in this episode. I do think that you're in the position where you could try, you need to go edge, right? Like that's the position that we're in right now. Corner, not necessarily great value at the moment, but to be fair, Jalen Walker is going to be a very good fit. He is. But the thing is, you guys, especially in Ulbricht's system, you guys like those stand-up rushers. And I could totally see Hassan Reddick following y'all here and playing that role. In nickel fronts, you could go after Shamar Stewart, right? You can use some wide 9 and end up making it work there. But, I mean, Mike Green has some off-the-field concerns. We've already talked about that ad nauseum. It's not fun to talk about. I'm kind of done talking about it. But the position I do think that you need, that you guys are heavily underrating, is nose. And teams have Kenneth Grant apparently in the top 5 to 10 on some of their boards. This is a position where you could go. And we've already had issues with the front office taking guys who we don't think they need as badly as other players at a spot where maybe they should have taken somebody else. At least in this spot, you're getting someone who legitimately, if used properly, could be a game changer. We're talking about only like Dexter Lawrence as somebody who has a similar athletic and physical archetype to Kenneth Grant. So I'm going to take the swing on it. And again, I'm trying out some new things. Feel free to call it out, and that's okay. I mean, I respect y'all for doing that. Like, hold me accountable. But if I make a pick and it doesn't line up logically, let me know why. Not because you didn't like it, but let me know where the logic fails. And yeah, I know some of these picks you're not going to like. You're never going to like anybody's mock draft 100%. But if maybe the logic ends up playing out the way that you want it to, then, maybe we can just agree that it's a difference of opinion. All right, number 16 for the Arizona Cardinals. I already know I could piss all y'all off the bat by going Jalen Walker here, so I'm not going to. I think defensive interior needs to be a focus. Walter Nolan's looked at as someone who might have some immaturity issues, but he's someone who's also looked at as one of the most high potential players in the class. I also see Kelvin Banks here, Josh Simmons, and Will Campbell, which, to be fair, again, Will Campbell should be slipping a little bit. He's not necessarily as foolproof as what people think, right? Now, Kelvin Banks, I've seen some mocks of Kelvin Banks to the Cardinals. Not against it. But I do think you need to focus on defensive line. And defensive line-wise, you look at Shedeur Stewart here, he's going to go higher than expected. And I think this is the team that might have the cojones to take him and use him as an edge rusher in particular wide 9 format. And then also when you go into nickel fronts, you can use him as an even edge, like an even front edge. And then also in odd fronts, you can use him as a defensive end still. I personally think that you guys could absolutely make that work. I know Robinson's also in the mix, but Shedeur Stewart needs to go somewhere, right? I can't do that. Walter Nolan's going to be the pick. Walter Nolan has the explosiveness. I think Gannon doesn't really care too much about immaturity. I don't really understand where that's coming from. I ended up hearing that from Lance Zierlein, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitter. That was the quote he used. But unreal raw potential, I'm going to go after Walter Nolan. At number 17 for the Bengals, cut Alex Kappa. Could see them going after a guard here, or they could end up actually being the ones to go after Shedeur Stewart. I'm going to say that cooler heads prevail. They end up going after interior offensive line and actually look at Will Campbell and are like, well, the value's great, and we don't really need a tackle, so I don't really want to take someone who's 6'5" with 33.5-inch arms and put him on the inside just yet. Will Campbell feels very comfortable to us because he ends up having that mobility, and he has that high upside to where he could end up filling in tackle. So it's been a fit that I've really liked, and it's one that I'm going to continue pushing for a little bit. Feel free to complain or say whatever other player you think is a good fit and why. At 18 for the Seahawks, I don't know what's going on with the receiving core. Zero clue. I mean, the receiving core, now DK's trying to leave. Lockett's gone. Matt Golden is kind of a dream pick to replace Tyler Lockett. Let's just be real. So I think that's a very underrated position. But Jalen Walker, absolutely, if you don't bring back Ernest, could be a great pickup for you because he has that positional flexibility. But Shamar might just be too much for McDonald to say no to because people love these project edges. I don't know if they could say no. But I do think that your receiving core is in such disarray at the moment that Matt Golden running the 4-3 and also kind of being a climate merchant, him being in Texas the whole time, I do think that maybe getting him to a rainier part and not a pure snowy part might be the better move. And I actually personally like it. I know that's over analysis. It's not a big reason why I'm choosing him, but it's, I do think he has the chance to be the number 5 overall pick in the draft when all is said and done. There's a chance. So Matt Golden goes at 18. Again, Lockett gone. DK might be gone, requesting a trade. I do think that McDonald will have to check himself, but the offensive line needs help. I do think this is a pretty solid interior offensive line class, but Matt Golden might be too good to pass on at the moment. At number 19 for the Buccaneers, I'm going to rush this one to the podium because in reality, I do think that teams are really going to focus on the value of Shedeur Stewart and the fact that you can end up upgrading from Hall on the defensive end side, but also, again, in nickel fronts when you have an even front, you can use him as a defensive end. I really like the potential there for Shedeur Stewart. Again, we do have a asterisk here that Shedeur Sanders falls out of the top 10. I have not really seen a team that I feel very comfortable taking him to, apart from maybe the Steelers. But again, with that, we'll discuss it. For the Denver Broncos, a lot of good routes that you could go. Luther Burden, after he tested, honestly gained a lot more favorability from me, and I'd love to see that because I've been wanting to see a little bit more of a consistent presence from Burden. My issue is that I don't think he's very high motor. I see a lot of routes he takes off. So Emeka Buka might be a better choice for the Broncos. But ultimately, I do think that based on the opinion right now of a lot of teams apparently loving Colston Loveland, I could see him being a lock there within the top 20, at least within the top 22. I don't see him slipping past 22. At 21 for the Steelers, I mean, this could be our chance to go after Shedeur. I mean, with the people clamoring about Mike Tomlin, there's a chance. There's a chance that this is the way, right? Shout out to Mandalorian. But, I do think that there's a couple areas where we can improve. I'd hope that like DJ Reed would be the corner we end up bringing in, but Trey Amos is a dark horse for this pick. He's very solid and tested out very well. Wide receiver wise, Emeka Egbuka, solid. Luther Burden, solid. The problem is I see both of them primarily as slots. And apparently we're seeing Deshaun Elliott on Instagram. I only saw a screenshot of this. Maybe it's fake, but a screenshot of him ending up commenting under that post saying for Christian Kirk to come to Pittsburgh, which we were trying to get him last year. But I think the reason we were trying to is because Roman Wilson wasn't healthy. So I would say potentially waiting to pick 53, you can end up getting someone like Jalen Noel if you really want to continue pushing it down the board. I'd feel very happy with that. And so I do think the Steelers are a team to reach on a quarterback in the first. And we're, again, assuming, the whole entire point of this is an assumption. I'm not making this claim. I'm just saying for this mock draft, we went under the assumption that Shedeur Sanders falls out of the top 10 because teams don't really truly believe in him as a bona fide first round guy. But for the Steelers, I do think that we are in such a desperate situation. And the options for us are so poor that Shedeur Sanders is an insanely big upgrade. So I do see us taking him here. You guys know me. I'm not the biggest Shedeur guy on planet Earth. I'm not the biggest Cam Ward guy either. I'm not the biggest Jackson Dart guy. I'm not the biggest quarterback guy in this class. I just do not like the class that much. But for the Steelers, I do think they're going to look and try to prioritize quarterback. And we have taken guys that have so-called personality concerns in the past, whether you believe it or not. Let's just say you do believe it. We've taken them on in the past. If you don't, even less to consider. So it's something I do want to put out there. Again, we assumed he'd slip out of the top 10, and then I ended up having him land here to the Steelers because I do think we've proven it before. We've been willing to take players that maybe don't have the upside at quarterback in the first round. I'll let Kenny Pickett. I'm hoping that Shedeur Sanders changes that narrative. And again, if Mike Tomlin's tenure is done, it's going to be absolute, like, I'm going to lose my shit. But Deion Sanders could end up coming in and being that, that longer term vision for the Steelers. So there's a chance. But let's continue on here at number 22 for the Los Angeles Chargers. You look at wide receiver and your wide receiver, it's the wide receiver coach. I'm forgetting which exact position he was, but he ended up working with DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf has had 3 1,000-yard seasons. Shout out to Alex Katzen on X for saying this, but all 3 seasons, this coach was with DK Metcalf. So I could see them going after someone who has a good balance of size and speed if you want to push it down the line like Dante Thornton. And I could see it working out really well. But you could, of course, go after someone Luther Burden. You could end up going after Emeka Egbuka. And I don't blame you one bit. Now, on the interior of the offensive line, though, I do have some questions. And Josh Simmons could play that, but I do worry, again, with him and Banks. It's like, there's a certain point where you start being disrespectful, right? And so Gray Zabel is a player who I personally think is getting extremely underrated now. But when we saw him in Mobile, the actual last time he played, I might add, he looked like a legit top-end, high-end talent. And I think that's right up Harbaugh's alley. Like, this is the type of guy that I think he goes for. So Gray Zabel goes at 22. At 23 for the Green Bay Packers, did they just go Malachi Starks? Just say fuck it. It's not impossible. But, I do think that when you're at 23... you fired a defensive line coach because there's definitely still more potential there that you want. Jalen Walker's still available. Could be an intriguing one for sure. But, honestly, Emeka's not a bad choice. He's not a bad choice. But I do see you guys probably trying to pass on the wide receiver route a little bit earlier. I'm going to get the player that is a little bit more unpopular for this team. But Jeff Hafley coached him just a little bit over a year ago. Donovan Ezeraku, who tested out phenomenally well and has a crazy tenure behind him as well. He's 6'2", over 6'2", and nearly 250 pounds with good arm length at 34 inches, good power as you see in his game, and then he ends up testing with excellent agility. So shout out to Donovan Ezeraku here. At number 24 for the Minnesota Vikings, value galore, right? Value galore. You can't really go wrong at this point. Again, we're having certain players fall for particular reasons, certain players not. Josh Simmons might be the choice in putting him at guard. At this point, it might just be worth it. I don't really see any other position that would make sense. You could talk about Derek Harmon here. It's possible. Tyler Booker, definitely in the mix. To be fair, the value for Tyler Booker right now is awesome, and I just don't like the agility he has. I would arguably say Donovan Jackson should be getting a little bit more love at the moment as a pure guard. But I'm actually going to go Tyler Booker. At number 25, we have the Houston Texans, and they need offensive line. They also need receiver. The question is, which one are they going to value more? The interior of the offensive line is extremely pricey now. So that is something that you need to focus on. But also receiver is as well. So the question is, in a very heavy free agency receiver market where you're seeing guys asking to get traded, seeing guys get cut, seeing guys who are just like, you know what? They're pretty solid players, but they're lurking out on the market. Stephon Diggs keeping his option open, which let's not act like Stephon Diggs is the Stephon Diggs that we knew. But, I mean, you have the connection here with Emeka Egbuka. That's what I like. The question is, can you end up developing a good enough roster around or a good enough offensive line to be able to make up for where Emeka could not make up for, which, I mean, Mecca's not going to block the defender in front of him. So I do have that concern. And for Kelvin Banks here, again, I've been talking about like, hey, this guy kind of solidified himself as a tackle. I think it's worth taking him here. And it's because you can use him as a guard with the vision of him becoming a tackle. Like, that's the thing. There's a difference. And you can say the same about Josh Simmons 100%. But I think with Kelvin Banks, the measurables are more measurably. So I'm going to go after Kelvin Banks here to the Texans. They also prefer guys who are, if I'm not mistaken, in Texas. So, I'm going to show some love with some geography there. At number 26 for the Los Angeles Rams, you got Malachi Starks here, which I love. But Jalen Walker just makes so much sense to me. I know they don't value linebacker all that high, but Jalen Walker can also double up as a pass rusher, which I think the versatility makes a lot of sense. But to be fair, Emeka Egbuka on this squad, Emeka Egbuka is built to be a Los Angeles Ram. You also talk about Jack Besh. Love him in this system as well. You can't really go wrong. I do think Emeka Egbuka is just too good of a fit. If you lose Cooper Kupp, you're going to replace Cooper Kupp before you try to do anything at the linebacker spot. Emeka Egbuka is the choice. And number 27 for the Ravens, they've done it again. Excellent value here. Could even go Jalen Walker if you wanted to, but I'm actually going to look at Malachi Starks here for the 3 safety sets. He's just too good to pass on. You could go after Josh Simmons right now, but you do have some injury question marks there. Josh Connerly, love that to death still, but I do want to change things up. I have yet to take Malachi Starks there to the Ravens. At number 28 for the Cleveland Browns, we ended up taking Cam Ward in the first, and some good players have fallen here, and I'm going to take my shot at offensive tackle here with Josh Simmons. I know, another Ohio State tackle to have some injury questions, but I do think Josh Simmons is an excellent player. And I mean an excellent player. So before injury, he was my number 4 overall player. That's what the plus means. And so it is what it is. Josh Simmons is going to be going at number 28. At number 29 for the Washington Commanders, Luther Burden would have been my selection if you didn't bring on Deebo Samuel. Does that completely knock it out of the park or knock it out of contention? No. But I do think Jalen Walker, because of the fact that I could see him going to Philly perchance, and then, a couple other teams as well would really, really like him. I think that it would be more disarming to take Jalen Walker here than it would be to go after Luther Burden. And again, Luther Burden's skill set, his assets, in my opinion, are very similar to what Deebo Samuel is going to offer, which is the after the catch ability. Luther Burden has the deep threat capabilities. He has good deep tracking as well. I would not blame them if they did go after Luther Burden. But I think that Dan Quinn is going to see Jalen Walker and be like, I get my linebacker with some pass rush capabilities off the bat. Bobby Wagner's up for a contract. This is a perfect fit. At number 30 for the Buffalo Bills. Oof, it's an interesting spot to be in. A lot of very good players are on the board. One that I do not see get remotely enough love is Tyleik Williams. And, he tested out very well. But I do think some teams are higher on Derek Harmon, who he tested out very well. If I'm not mistaken, he has close to 35-inch arms as well. Very, very good build, and he's pretty damn young. Testing-wise, he did phenomenally well. I think he'd do well in Buffalo. He did well in Michigan State, so I personally think that he can do well here on top of that. So Derek Harmon's going to be the choice. At number 31 for the Kansas City Chiefs, again, some really good choices that are on the board. You ended up trading away Joe Tooney, but you're kicking in Kingsley Suamataia to guard. I just don't really trust Josh Connerly to be that tackle there. Same thing with Ursary and Jackson. If I were you, spend the money in free agency, please. I think that's going to be the best return on investment for you. Now, if Jalen Walker were here, I think that's a great move. I also think that corner, underrated position to target. You have guys like Trey Amos here that I think are very good, that I also don't really know if you'd get a chance at number 63. Defensive interior wise, I think it's a worse class than what people say. I really do. After this initial group, you're starting to get those guys that you want to take on round number 3. And so I personally think you can go, and if you're trying to ring chase, and this is someone who's been mentioned at the end of the first, I'm looking at Darius Alexander here. He might be 25 years old as a rookie, but this dude ended up dominating every player he pretty much went up against in Mobile versus the best of the best. And so I'm going to give him the love he deserves. People are legitimately talking about this guy as a potential first-round pick. And so I think this is a very reasonable range for him to go. And Philly might be considering Darius Alexander at that point. At number 32 for the Philadelphia Eagles, how he ended up saying, if I'm not mistaken, I'm forgetting which podcast it was. It might have been Shefty's podcast. But he was like, we do not tolerate violence against women in any way, shape, or form, even if alleged. Mike Green's off the table. Like, that's my conclusion from that quote. You guys can end up looking it up for yourself. James Pierce has just been kind of talked about as an uncoachable weirdo. But people are also saying that there might be a chance he slips out of the top 64. So let's assume that. Let's have a good time. Let's test some new theories here, right? Now, we're looking at what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing. They released Slay and Bradbury. Baldberry is gone. And so I'm looking at players who could potentially play the slot, because they ended up bringing on, like, who plays the best zone. That's the bottom line where I'm trying to get to. Ben Morrison, in my opinion, might be in there. After that, it does get kind of slim pickings. So the question is, because you guys ended up having Coop initially evaluated as a boundary corner. Trey Amos, you ended up bringing in, and ended up, like, he's a good player. Very good player. But you guys could still end up going after, you guys could still go after an edge here, because I do worry that James Pierce, like, I think it might be a smokescreen at this point. But there's a chance. And again, I'm not saying James Pierce's talent will say that he doesn't go at 32. I do think that there is a chance, though, that we do see another player slip into the top 32. And I might put my foot down on this guy because every single person loves him to death. I'm looking at Braden Swinson here. And again, Mike Green falling because of, off the field concerns. And again, this is the team that I do not see that being a fit on based on the comments that were made. James Pierce, people are talking about him falling out of the top 64. So I'm going to try my best to continue pushing him down, right? So with those two guys essentially off my board, I look at Nick Scorton, who's going to be a solid, based on his size right now, he could end up actually being a good fit for this team, but he's coming down from 285, and he's going to be someone who is trying his best to beat Josh Sweat. And you don't necessarily need that because, in nickel fronts, which you run a lot of, you'll be an even front. But Braden Swinson's done that as well. And in odd fronts, you can end up using him as a multiple. I think this is like the dark horse of the class that goes higher than what people think. So I'm going to throw the curveball because I love him and I'm going to send him to a team that I personally really, really like. I really love this team. I do. And I could look at defensive interior here. Tyleik Williams would be intriguing, especially with like 1 year left on, 1 year that you're probably going to use. I don't know if you're going to use for a 5th year contract for Jordan Davis, but I'm going to go Braden Swinson. At this point, I think every single person who I've seen watch him says, like, dude, this is the most underrated player of the class. How many times are we going to say that before we actually start putting him as a legitimate potential first-round pick? And I think that the best choice for the Eagles ended up being taken at 23, and that's Donovan Ezuraku. But Braden Swinson, I'm going to put my foot down. You guys know I've been the conductor on the Braden Swinson train. I think he is the best all-around, no questions asked, like no issues edge in the class. And I haven't seen anything about, Abdul Carter yanked a dude out of the car. Yeah, you yanked a tow truck driver. You can look it up for yourself. Like, this wasn't too long ago. It was like a year ago. Abdul ended up, he politely threw him on the grass instead of the concrete ground. But, at least for, Braden, I haven't seen any of, him being a complete douche nozzle or throwing dudes on the ground. We'll see. You can end up, drop the links. Or, well, don't drop the links. Say what you searched. I don't like people dropping hyperlinks. because we don't click on those. But regardless, at number 33 for the Browns, end up going Josh Simmons and Cam Ward. Really, really good duo. Really, really good pickup right there. So at this point, running back could absolutely be on the board. Quinshon Judkins in the equation, Trey Henderson in the equation. Like, my only problem, I mean, to be fair, I do think the class got a little bit worse overall in most people's eyes when you see Caleb Johnson running near a 4.6. Cam Scatabo not even really testing outside the explosiveness, which was good, but a lot of people do have some concerns about it. But then, I mean, the guy who I want to talk about is Bishal Tootin as well, who tested out phenomenally well. I do think, though, with seeing Nick Chubb going, Quinshon Judkins, a lot of people do believe in him as a potential fringe one. And with no trades, we're going to go after Quinshon here. I think that getting your star left tackle, star running back, and your star quarterback, it's a great harmony to have. At number 34 for the New York Giants, we went after Travis Hunter in the first. Again, we could end up going after Jackson Dart here, but I do think that's something that you could wait for round number 3 because I do think you address it with Aaron Rodgers potentially or with Sam Darnold, one of the two. Which, again, I'm kind of delegating those to the two teams that ended up going heavily after Matt Stafford. I think it makes sense. But regardless, I do think offensive line's a massive issue for this team. A massive issue that people just continue neglecting. And I don't know why. But, I mean, I genuinely believe someone like Donovan Jackson, who could play guard in the short run and also end up having that tackle versatility, Josh Connerly as well, I don't see the reason why you would not want one of these players on your team. Ozzie Trapilo will be that right tackle for the future. You lock him in, and that's going to be a long-term right tackle. And honestly, I don't know why y'all don't like that idea. Ozzie Trapilo is great to me. He is like pretty much like up there with the best of the best in the class. Honestly, I think he's going to get taken higher than these guys are expecting as well. Donovan Jackson's really good. Josh Connerly's really good. To be fair, you can't really go wrong, but I'm not trying to replace a left tackle. I'd rather go after someone who is a legit high-end right tackle, and that's Ozzie Trapilo. At number 35 for the Titans, went Abdul Carter in round number 1. Again, I don't want to keep James Pierce in an environment that he's been listed or talked about as like not very pleasant to be around. Luther Burden would be great, but I just also think we got to address the offensive line. You got to do it. You got to do it. And looking at the tackles that are available, I think that you guys could end up going after Ursary or Jackson here. Ursary is a more intriguing project. And when you end up looking at how you went after J.C. Latham last year, the closest one that embodies J.C. Latham is Ariante Ursary with the mobility and the physical build. So I do think he actually might go above guys like Josh Connerly as well as Donovan Jackson. At number 36 for Jacksonville went Mason Graham in the first. And here in the second, I think Luther Burden might be a great choice now that you don't have Christian Kirk on the roster. And so I'm going to take it. You have an offensive coach. I think this is going to be great. Liam Cohen gets kind of like his version of Chris Godwin here with Luther Burden. At number 37 for the Las Vegas Raiders went Will Johnson in the first. Could try to maximize and get like James Pierce here and deal with the personality concerns. And, if you do that, I don't blame you. I really don't. But I do think wide receiver is going to be a position you guys do target. And I'm looking at Jack Besh in terms of his reliability and also Jaden Higgins. Io Maynor has some issues with the knee that have been brought up. Higgins and Besh. Higgins tested out phenomenally well. If you want to get an on-sale DK, you're talking about 6'4", and he is 215, or maybe like 210. But he ran 4.47, jumped 39 inches. I mean, this guy deserves to be at least in the consideration here. And so I do think that you guys end up rocking him, and I think it's worth it. He's a very good player, and he's somebody who I've supported a lot. I know Connor Rogers loved Jaden Higgins as well, so again, another shout out to Connor Rogers. At number 38 overall, we have the New England Patriots, who got Ashton Genty in the first, and people who are crying saying, oh, what about our left tackle? Shabang. Look at this shit. All right. Josh Connerly, Donovan Jackson. The question is, who do you want to go after more? And looking at the particular builds, like Josh Connerly, like a little bit more undersized necessarily. Donovan Jackson, going to be, very similar. Both of them are kind of like guard tackle hybrids. I kind of forgot about the fact Donovan Jackson was 6'4". Whoopsies. But I think Donovan Jackson has the more potential based on the fact that he's so new to the position and has a little bit of a better anchor. Josh Connerly is incredible. I'm not trying to throw any sort of shade towards Josh Connerly, but Donovan Jackson is going to be the pick for me. I think that's fair. You can go either way, but Donovan Jackson is going to be the pick. For the Bears, they went Amarian Hampton in the first round, and I think that's great. I really do. Josh Connerly arguably is another pick that I might go and just end up upgrading that left tackle spot. I mean, you can end up putting him at the other guard spot as well, especially if Jackson's unreliable. Not a bad idea. I know James Pierce is here again. I've talked about the reason why he's fallen. Mike Green also has some potential concerns, but I'm just going to be honest. Josh Connerly, kind of exciting, but Mike Green, also kind of exciting. Mike Green's a great player. Don't get me wrong, but there are some concerns there that some teams might find a little bit more valid than other teams. I'm going to potentially go after Josh Connerly here because I like the idea of playing him at guard with the vision for him to become the future left tackle, and I'd be willing to sacrifice Mike Green because of the other edge rushers available. For the New Orleans Saints, they end up going Tyler Warren the first, and I trust, again, that Mike Green, the issues are in the past, but the issues happened. And I'm hoping to God, and I'm praying to God that the issues never actually happened. But the incidents did, right? The incidents did. Whether they're truthful or not, that is for you to judge. But there are some other guys with some bigger issues in this draft. But I do think Mike Green, especially in a loaded edge class with a ton of very good players, this is a team that I think will be willing to take a shot and give this guy the best chance he deserves. And again, I'm rooting for this guy. I really do hope that the allegations were false and that it was just unfortunately bad people. Hopefully the people who ended up accusing Mike Green of things, I hope that it was them who were doing the wrong, because also in that equation, that means they weren't actually legitimately harmed. So fingers crossed about that. Again, let's not make this into a conversation about it, but I had Mike Green slipping. It happens. Good players fall in the draft. At number 41 for the Bears, we got Hampton and Connerly. I think that's a great duo to have. I think this is at the point where you could go after James Pierce. You can go after Scorton as well. I don't think that you can really go wrong here. JT Tuimalau as well. I mean, you really can't go wrong. But I think that, the question is, coachability doesn't matter. Dennis Allen is a really good coach. So if you can get JT or Scorton here, I think that you're cooking with Crisco. I'm actually going to go after Nick Scorton because I think that you can get the Purdue version in, which I think DA could. I really like what you got there. Now, the other player I'd toss in there is Tyleik Williams, but Nick Scorton, I think, would be valued a little bit higher by DA. Armand Membu went in the first to the Jets. Here in the second, am I copying Connor Rogers? I feel like I am with Tyleik Williams. Just absolute beef on the interior. You build through the trenches. Tyleik Williams is an absolute plug. So I think pretty sure that was the tweet. That's going to be ridiculous if it is. I'm not copying Connor, and no, this is not a pitch to get Connor on the show. Granted, we've talked about it before, and we'll try to make it work. We have a really good lineup of dudes coming on the show. I hope you guys are super excited for that. But regardless, at number 43, we got Michael Williams, who went in the first. Again, I'm dropping James Pierce from rumors that he's going to be slipping out of the first round. But regardless, I mean, if you end up getting rid of Ayuk, Jack Besh is perfect. You have him, Ricky Pearsall. I really like that duo. But I do think a boundary corner number 2 is super key. And someone who I see working really well in the system is Trey Amos or Azareye'h Thomas. And the reason I'm going to go Azareye'h is, he played with Renardo Green. How sick is that? So, I mean, granted, offensive line-wise, you definitely could... Let's take a peek before we end up giving up on it. Belton's super duper solid, and someone who I will be going here in round 2. That might be someone who you can't go wrong here. You can't, because Azareye'h is so fun. Azareye'h is a fun player. And the Niners have drafted offensive linemen in the second or the first as well. And so, I mean, Renardo Green was drafted in the second last year. You could literally do it again with Azareye'h Thomas, who's a very, very good corner. I do have some questions about Azareye'h more than Belton here, because I think Belton would be an excellent left guard, trained up to be the future at left tackle or right tackle. To me, doesn't matter. Anthony Belton's going to be the choice. I think this tackle class really does fall off a cliff after Anthony Belton. You do look at the tackles. Cam Williams, extreme project. Marcus Bowe, some people talk about him as a center, 32-inch arms. Jonas Savania, also interior. Wyatt Milam, also interior. Charles Grant, massive project. Jalen Rivers looked at as an interior. Let's continue going down the list. Emory Jones is probably the next most reliable tackle. Johnny Cornelius probably going to be on the interior. Jack Nelson and Holland Pierce. It's not good. It does fall off, but I mean, I do think that if you use Belton as a guard with the legit vision of him being a tackle, and I think he could fill in tackle early on if you need him to, it's a good vision. It's a good vision. It's worth executing. Cowboys ended up going Tetro McMillan in round number 1. I think that's the right thing to do. And honestly, Anthony Belton would have been kind of like my dream pick there. I mean, Belton's kind of that guy for me. And I'm going to stand behind him because I think especially as a guard, it'd work a lot. And especially with the Cowboys, you'd be getting Tyler Smith 2.0 on the interior. Like, that might be my comp for Belton, come to think of it. We could totally revamp the receiving core and go after McMillan and Besh, and that would be probably the best of the best. But let's avoid that. Let's avoid that for the time being. I do think JT Tuimoloau is a dark horse pick here. I mean, really high floor player, like just somebody that you can like genuinely rely on a consistent basis. But the player who I'll show love right now is TreVeyon Henderson. Home run hitting back, like definitely something that the Cowboys could be using. And, Caleb Johnson would be a little bit more up the alley if they every down back, but I kind of want to steer away from that a little bit and let Schottenheimer use the high potential of TreVeyon Henderson and see what happens there between those two firecrackers and bring some firepower to the team. Number 45 for the Indianapolis Colts. Tight end, potentially possible, but I mean, the tight end class didn't test out too well. First round went Jahdae Barron to be a Swiss Army knife for Lou's defense. And, I mean, to be fair, there's still some great players here. Like, Lou, I think, loves Ohio State edge rushers. He does, right? Like, it worked for him. JT Tuimoloau is still here. And you guys, Dio is going to be going and getting that contract, getting that money. You don't have a legitimate edge, too. And I know we got to invest in the offense. But I also just talked about how the fact I don't like the guards that are available, right? So let's not even try to address that. The tight ends I don't trust. I'm going to go after JT Tuimoloau here because I think the value is just impeccable. He's a damn good player. I'll scroll down as well so you guys get to see a little bit more of my board. At number 46 for the Atlanta Falcons, ended up going after Kenneth Grant in the first. And, I mean, at this point, you might want to go after James Pierce, even with the potential concerns. And I do think this is one of those teams where they might be willing to do that. But also with Trey Amos here, I do want to say, like, hey, this is a legit need as well. Wide receiver Jack Besh would be a good option too. But Trey Amos, with the physicality, I think he pairs up excellently as a boundary too. I'm going to rock Trey Amos at this spot instead. You got Kenneth Grant and Trey Amos. For the Cardinals, they went after Walter Nolan. And again, we talked about some immaturity issues with Walter Nolan that I heard from some tweets. Again, I'm not going to confirm it, but some people just believe it, right? I think that Walter Nolan's still developing a lot. He's somebody that continues to fall down even when, he's pretty much one-on-one. He just doesn't understand how to control his balance. And that's something that'll take time. And honestly, I love that he's so explosive that he can't control it. But James Pierce is going to be my selection here because I do think Gannon's such a relaxed coach that I personally trust him to make things work. So I'm going to trust it. James Pierce, Walter Nolan. Number 48 for the Dolphins. You got some good players here for sure. And I'm going after Nick Ebenwari in the first. And it's a little bit disappointing about the guys who are here. But honestly, Jared Wilson, with the athleticism that he brings, could be an excellent guard, especially with the ability to move to center. Honestly, I think he ended up playing himself into this range as well. You could talk yourself into some other offensive linemen here. Like, Emory Jones is a dark horse riser. Like, he's a good player, has a good arm length. Like, you could talk about him in this range. Jonas Savania absolutely could be in this range, to be fair. But Jared Wilson, if he didn't have, like, fatigue from the whole entire season, I think he would have ended up balling out at the Senior Bowl and doing an excellent job. You got to go after offensive line, and Jared Wilson played himself into the second round, in my opinion, and without trades, it makes sense. At number 49 for the Cincinnati Bengals, ended up losing. We ended up going Will Campbell. And I think that Besh could be an extremely fun option here. But Xavier Watson, getting Al Golden, one of his guys, right? Whether that is Ben Morrison or if that is going to be Xavier Watts, I do not necessarily care. But I'm going to actually change it up a little bit. I think that the 2 hip surgeries have dropped Ben Morrison far enough. In my Bengals 7-round mock draft, I actually ended up going after Xavier Watts. But Ben Morrison's going to be my pick here. Your boundary corner situation does not look very good. When healthy, Ben Morrison was my number 3 player in the class. Of course, again, I'm no doctor. I'm not going to predict what he is after. I'll only tell you what I think of him before. The Seahawks went Matt Golden in the first round, which, again, super exciting. But Xavier Watts could end up being part of that safety set. And honestly, Xavier Watts would be super fun. Like, I think that'd be a really, really good player to add into this group. Darian Porter as well as Zaire Thomas. Like, good group of dudes right now in that secondary for us to bring in. And I think that's something that we need to really think about. Xavier Watts, that interception potential, but Darian Porter, Azareye'h Thomas, those are two guys here that I really like to play on the boundary. That boundary corner 2 position is not good. Like, I'll say it first, it's not good. And Darian Porter brings both the physicality, not necessarily physicality, I should end up saying the fluidity, the size, and the speed that you guys kind of saw without the fluidity part with Tariq Woolen. And Darian Porter's a former receiver, had 3 interceptions on the year. Look at the passer rating, 4.7. He ran a 4.3. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but this is a team that needs to kind of like rebound and go forward. And I think Darian Porter is going to be a big portion of that. At number 51 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you got Shedeur Sanders in round number 1. Honestly, I'm going to go after someone who's going to be a really big asset to this team. I could go after Azareye'h Thomas and it would be a great move. But I'm going to go after something a little bit different. I'm going to get another culture leader on the offensive side. I'm going to go after Jack Besh, wide receiver out of TCU. I just absolutely screwed myself over, by the way. I could have given Besh to the Steelers, and then it would have been like fireworks. But you guys know what I think of Besh. I love him to death. That's my guy. And number 52, the Broncos end up going after a tight end in the first round with Colston Loveland. Caleb Johnson could be a really good workhorse for this team. I do not mind that at all, but I do love the idea of Xavier Watts being an absolute savage there in that lofty, very thin air in Denver. I'm going to go after Xavier Watts. At number 53 for the Steelers, it's pretty easy for me to like complain about Jack Besh when you can still get Eli Omener here. We went after Shedeur Sanders, which again, the theory was that he would fall. I'm going to go after Omener here. I do think we pick up defensive back in free agency. If we do not, and we go after more receiver heavy, then I think we're in a very good position. Savon Ravel still available, which Savon could have ended up being a pick here for the Seahawks, absolutely. But I'm going to go after Omener nonetheless. At 54 for the Chargers, I think this is a dark horse spot. We went after Gray Zabel, but a boundary corner situation with Savon Ravel could be very intriguing because I think he has some similar characteristics to Cam Hart with a little bit more athleticism. Again, shout out to Alex Katzen. But I do think you might want to continue retooling the offensive side. Jalen Knoll is incredible, and he's somebody who could absolutely have played himself into the top 54. I will say, though, we can't forget that Caleb Johnson ended up having a ridiculous year. And, the dude he doesn't have a ton of reps under his belt, and yeah, he has a ton of yards. I think this guy's a really, really good pick. So you just go after reliability. Sometimes you don't need to get flashy. You helped out the interior of the offensive line. Now we ended up helping out the running game. At 55 for the Packers, we went after the Hafley special with Donovan Ezeraku. And, we could go after receiver because that's needed, but why? Why would we? You could go after Max Hairston. I'll just say do your own research. There's some very, very bad stuff that's out there that is not confirmed, but it is on the University of Kentucky Crime Report, March 25th, 2021. Go check it out yourself. Someone ended up doing a whole entire video on it. I'm not going to say any more to it, but I did my own check, and it is still open. They did not close the case. And it is more disturbing than I think what people are going to give it credit for. So that's why he's dropping. I'm going to go after Savon Ravel here. Really good player. You could end up taking him higher. Then you could end up just pushing guys down. Darian Porter would have been a good pick too. At number 56 for the Bills, I went after Derek Harmon in round number 1. We have a couple of picks here, and we're in a good spot. We are in a good spot. You could go after Max Hairston again. The question is, can you live with something that happened in 2021? I don't know if I can. I'm going to go after Azareye'h Thomas here and continue building that secondary with a freak athlete here at 6'2", 198, really, really good build, and just needs to get better accelerating out of his cuts, but at 56, value's impeccable. Texans went Kelvin Banks in round number 1. Here in round number 2, honestly, could double dip on the offensive line. Don't think I'm going to, but defensive interior, you guys do a good job at kind of maximizing value on the defensive interior. I think that could be a round 3/day 3 issue. Wide receiver, though, I do think Jalen Knoll deserves some credit here. Jalen Rolls as well, very good player. Kyle Williams, I think he should be playing into this role. But Jalen Knoll, he might be at that 5'10" mark, but this dude is so dynamic, and he tested out unbelievably well as well. Very explosive. And he's just somebody that has some contested catches on his record that are just awesome. And 5% drop rate, man. This dude's a definition of reliability. So if you can end up walking out of here with Kelvin Banks and Jalen Knoll, you could have ended up walking out of here with, Jonas Savania and Emeka Ibuka. But I'd be a lot happier, personally. I'd be a lot happier going after Jalen Noel and Kelvin Banks. At number 58 for the Panthers, they went after Jahad Campbell as the hot pick at number 8 overall, which, again, going to get some feathers ruffled. I understand it. It's okay. We still all love each other here. I do still think you can end up addressing some edge rushing value here. You got Princely Umami-Ellen, who I think is going to be a really solid player. Jordan Birch as well. You really can't go wrong with those two. Umami-Ellen's probably going to be a little bit more up your alley. Again, linebacker-wise, if you really want to go ballsy, you can go Demetrius Knight and kick Jahad to the pure edge. That'd be hot, but it'd be super baller. Like, I fuck with it, but I do think Princely Umami-Ellen at this point is worth it. Statistically, did an incredible job. Was a bit underwhelming in Mobile, hence why he falls to 58 rather than goes in the first. At number 59 for the Baltimore Ravens went Malachi Starks there in the first. Another team that could absolutely capitalize on some falling pass rush here. You got Kyle Kennard, you got Jordan Birch as well. I love Jordan Birch because you can use him in a role where like Calais Campbell once was, and you have that flexibility to use him as both a even front end as well as an odd front. So I like that quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, personally, I think that's the value right now. Let's go after Jordan Birch there at number 59. Tested out very well for 270 pounds. Number 60 for the Lions ended up getting Myles Garrett in round number 1. Here in round number 2, we're going to potentially look at the interior of the offensive line because I do think it's worth it, right? Jonas Savania right now is the most enticing option. You go after Emory Jones, but, it's getting to the point where I think Jonas Savania would be a little bit more of the project to take to grow behind at center. So I'm going to go after Jonah. Again, we ended up going after edge with Myles Garrett in round 1. That's going to be the pick there. Number 61 for the Commanders went Jalen Walker in round number 1. I think that's a good spot to be. You could go after Max Hairston and kind of like bet on, being optimistic. It's possible. At 61, I think it's starting to get to where like you can bet on him being like more than what actually happened, which again, please go and do the research for yourself. I'm not going to be spewing to you guys anything that I exactly know. I'm just parroting what other people have said, including the person who said that she was part of it. So with all that being said, I mean, you could look at wide receiver here. Jalen Royals is a very good player and has the deep threat ability, after the catch ability, and the flexibility to go in the slot as well in the boundary. Let's do it. Let's go after Jalen Royals. We'll go after kind of like 2 more so luxury picks, but I think they're still good picks nonetheless. Leaving the Bills in a spot where they could have ended up sniping Jalen Royals. I didn't even think about that. And, Azaria Thomas, Derek Harmon, like good group of guys, but we did kind of shellac y'all a little bit in terms of the wide receiver market. Now, that being said, you still have guys like Trey Harris who are very, very good, right? Dante Thornton, who will never go in the second, but somebody like if you want to look at end of round 3 into day 3 territory, worth it. I just say let's go after edge. Let's go after best player available. Why take a loss, I say. And Femi Oladejo's the guy here. Femi's a monster. And I keep forgetting about Femi. Like, maybe I should have taken him a lot earlier. Like, you can end up swapping him with Princely Umami-Ellen. I mean, hell, you could... Who would I want to swap him with? You could swap him with JT Tumalau for all I care. Nick Scorton, like... This is going to be, like, he deserves to be a second-round pick. I keep forgetting Trev has him down so far, but regardless, I mean, hell, you could swap Jordan Birch and him if you want, but to be fair, Femi, I think, is more of an even front end more than kicking to the inside, so I actually like this fit a lot better. At number 63, though, for the Kansas City Chiefs, we ended up going after Darius Alexander in the first. Could have went TJ Sanders here in the second if we did end up being patient. This is where we could take a project offensive tackle. I just haven't seen the prospects of that working out too much. Linebacker wise, I actually really like this team developing Demetrius Knight. Edge rusher is possible, but I also think boundary corner. I think you guys are willing to trust that Max Hairston ends up actually having a better, like, we haven't heard anything since 2021. So fingers crossed that I'm wrong about this and that she's wrong about this, but the police report's public. You guys can end up like looking for it. And so we're going to go after Max Hairston there at number 63. Number 64 for the Philadelphia Eagles went Braden Swins in round 1. Already know I'm going to get a ton of shit for that, but that is okay. At this spot, again, since it's the end of the mock, so you guys can end up putting guys that you want. You could talk about Cam Williams. You talk about Emory Jones, like developing him at Stout U. I'm looking at Demetrius Knight here. Like Demetrius Knight is a very intriguing option. You can look at cornerback as well. I mean, like at this point, I personally would wait. There's some good players down the board. I love Jalen Smith, but I mean, I just don't think Jalen's going to be drafted that high. Mac McWilliams as well. Like there's some guys that you can steal. But other positions I think you should look at, tight end. I mean, Mason Taylor's here. Terrence Ferguson tested out very well. Like definitely good targets. But if I'm just you, I would send a pick and get yourself a really solid tight end and Michael Mayer to back up Dallas Goedert as he continues to age. And we got our edge already. Like defensive interior wise, I guess we can go TJ Sanders. Y'all met with him too. Like he got his way up to 297. So honestly, it's a good rotation of dudes. Let's go after TJ Sanders. But I do think it's like TJ Sanders primarily and then Demetrius Knight. Those are the guys who I'd go after. But those are the full results. It was actually a really fun mock draft. Ended up falling a little bit differently than I ever expected. Hopefully you guys enjoyed as well. Love you. See you on the far side. Peace.